Hi everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to look at how to utilize the Python interpreter. Now unlike other programming languages like Java or C#, Python is a programming language that is interpreted. By this I mean that we do not need to compile our code before we not need to compile our code before we can see the actual results of what our programs are doing. So we can be able to just basically run our Python code and then get the output. Now this can help us to experiment with our ideas and get output while we're working with our code. Now in this video we're going to look at the different ways you can utilize the interpreter to our advantage. So without further ado, let's get started. But before I start, my name is Ali Jonathan and on this channel I talk about programming and related stuff. And if you're into such topics, please go ahead and subscribe because such content is going to be available on this channel. So let's get started. Depending on which operating system you are on, you're going to have a different way of running Python. For example, if I'm on Ubuntu or any other Linux distribution, you may have various versions of Python installed on your system. For example, on my system, on Ubuntu, I have Python. So when I say Python, I have Python 3 installed. So let me check out the various versions of Python 3. So if I say Python 3, and I have Python 3.8 as well as Python 3.9 installed on my system. Now to run any Python file, what I may have to do is to create a file. So let me start by creating a file. Say vim app.py. So let's say this is my blank Python file for now, and let's say I start importing. I'm using vim in this case. So if I say from Flask import Flask, then let me say I create app is equal to Flask name, and let's say we create app dot route, then we create our first route. So let's say we create our first function, and then this function basically returns hello. So let's say if I run the script, if name equals main, then what you may want to do is to run the app. So I'll save this, and once I save this, then the next thing we're going to see how to do is to run this script. So with Python, we normally run our script with Python. So on this system I have two versions of Python 3 installed. However, you can also have Python 2 installed. Now me, I have only Python 3. I have Python 3.5 and Python 3.8. Now in this case, what I'll do is to say Python 3, then run the app with app.py. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to run app.py. So this is going to run our app. So basically what we see here is we do not need to compile our code for us to be able to see the result of what our code is doing. So just like you see here, we have started our server, our development server of Flask, and it's going to run at port 5000. So if I click on this, it's going to open up our Chrome and basically show us the response from this small server that we've created. Just like you see here, we see that the server has returned a response of hello. So that's how we can be able to run a Python program. So let's say we wanted to use another version of Python. So in this case, for me, my system is having two versions of Python 3, Python 3.5 and Python 3.9 and Python 3.8. So if I go back to my terminal right here, I can be able to stop the server with Ctrl+C, and what I'll do is to basically specify. So if I want to maybe run the program with Python 3.8, I'll say Python 3.8, then app.py, and that will run it with Python 3.8. Now if I want to run the program with Python 3.9, I'll as well say Python 3.9 and then app.py. So right now we see that Python 3.9 does not have Flask installed. So let's look at how we can run our Python interactively. So we can open up our Python interpreter by saying Python 3. So this is going to open up Python 3.8 on my system. And let's say if I wanted to run Python 3.9, so I'll say Python 3.9, And this will also open up a Python interpreter of Python 3.9. Now, if I wanted to test out code, for example, print hello world, so I can say print hello world, and let me close this. So basically it provides us with this interpreter that can allow us to see what our code is going to give us as a result. I can as well say like for n in, let's say, my name Jonathan, then what I can do is to basically go ahead and print n. So this is basically going to print out all the names of all the letters in my name. So we can see that we can be able to run our code within this interactive shell. However, the Python interpreter also allows for us to basically run our programs or be able to use it when we are not using it interactively, just like we can see here. So I'll exit out of the shell by saying Ctrl Z, and I'll clear the terminal with Ctrl L. Now we are going to look at the various command line options that the Python interpreter may give us. For example, when I say Python 3 and then minus minus help, this is for when you're on a Linux system. So we can see the different options that you can pass with the Python 3 command so as to do something. For example, the -b flag that issues warnings about strings. We can also see the -m command, which you normally run when maybe executing things like pip or flask or creating a virtual environment that basically helps you to run a library module as a script. You also look at things like -v that helps you to print the Python version number and exit. So let's try out some of these. So for example, if I clear the terminal with Ctrl L, I can simply come and say Python, and in this case we are using Python 3, so I can say Python -m, and then we call a library. For example, we can call the virtualenv library, and we'll be able to create a virtual environment within our folder. So we can say venv and then env. So this will run, and this will call virtualenv and then create a virtual environment within our folder or directory. So if I ls right here, we can be able to see our virtual environment created right here. So another thing we can also do is to run our Python without having to actually write it within a file. So Python provides a command which helps us to run any Python code. So let's see how that is done. So we can say Python 3 and then -c, and then we can write whatever command we may want to write. So for example, we can say print, and then can basically provide some Python code here, which is going to be hello world. So I'm going to run this. So when I run this, so right here we have an error simply because we've used these double quotes. So let me try to correct this. So for example, if I did print hello world, so this will go ahead and print hello world. So this is one way we can be able to run Python code without having to write it within a file. So another thing we can also do is to check out our Python version number. So just like we saw in our help, so when I say Python, so this is going to be Python 3 -v. So this is going to print out our Python number. So you can as well check for other Python options. So for example, Python 3 help, and this is going to return various information on the different commands that you may need to use when you're using Python. And the reason that's why I have this Python command on my Linux system is because my Python is added to path. We're also going to check out how to be able to check for our Python installation on Windows and how we can see that it's added to path. Alright, things are quite different on a Windows system. For example, on a Windows system, for us to execute the Python interpreter, we have to say Python, and then this will run our Python interpreter. For example, here we have Python 3.9.5. So with Linux, we had to run Python 2 and then Python 3. And we also ran different specific versions of a certain Python version. For example, Python 3, I had Python 3.9, and then Python 3.8 on my Linux system. Right here I have only Python 3.9. So this is happening because we installed Python and we added it to path. Now to check whether Python is installed in our path, what I'll have to do is to open up my Windows. So I'll press the Windows key. And what I'll do is to search for environment variables. So you see this thing of edit the system environment variables. So I'll go to the control panel, and right in here, what you're interested in is environment variables. So when I go to environment variables, we can be able to see something like our path. So when I go to path, you can see the different things added to our path. For example, we have Windows apps, we have npm. Now we also have our Python that's added. For example, in C, users Jonathan, app data, roaming, and then Python 3. So when I go to this path, so let me say I go to that exact path. So actually, let me copy it. So I'll come to path, and then I'll copy this exact Python path. So if I open up my file explorer, and what I'm going to do is to paste that path, and right in here we can be able to see where our Python executables are. For example, pip, pip3, pipenv, and the various other Python executables. So basically all commands specific to Python that we have on our Windows system, we can be able to view where they are. And let's look at how we can use environment variables. So right here I have my terminal, so I'll say Python 3, and what I'll do is to import OS. So we're going to be using OS to access our environment variables. So I'll import OS, and if I want to access any environment variables, I access them via the os.environ dictionary. So when I say os.environ, we can be able to see a dictionary containing all our, so let me actually maximize this. So basically we have a dictionary right here that contains all of our environment variables. So let's say I wanted to access a certain environment variable. So what I'll do is to maximize this so that you guys can see and clear the terminal. So if I want to access a certain environment variable such as, so I can say os.environ. So I can say os.environ, and I specify the environment variable. So for example, I want to access our Android home. Basically, this is going to return the path to which our Android SDK is installed. So I can say Android home. And basically what this will do is to print where the Android SDK is installed on the system. So we can also be able to access an environment variable. So for example, let me say os.environ. So let's say I wanted to check out where our bash is installed. So I can say environ. I can actually say .get as well, then specify where the shell is installed. So I can say shell, and then it's going to return /bin/bash. So we can also be able to set our environment variables using os.environ. So for example, what I can do is to say os.environ. Then what I'll do is to actually set up. So what I can do is to say name, and then say that my name is, let's say, Jonathan. So once I do that, so for example, if I wanted to access os.environ.name, actually, let's say os.environ. So in this case, this is our environment variables. So if we wanted to access the name, so right here we have these different environment variables. So let's say we wanted to access the name, we can actually say os.environ. Then I specify that I want to access the name, and this is going to return our name. Let us look at how we can create an executable Python script. So if on a system like Mac or Linux, you can be able to run your Python as an executable. Let's see how to do that. So I can create a file. So for example, I can say I create a file called calculate.py. So what I'll do is to say calculate.py. So I'm going to open this up with Vim, and let's say we have a simple function. We have a simple function that takes in x and y, for example, and then basically returns x plus y. So once we do that, we can call this, actually let me call this add. So once I have this function, I can basically call this. So for example, I can say add 2 and 3. So if I add these two numbers, I can go ahead and write this file. So to make this executable, by default, I have to run it with Python 3, then calculate.py, and then this will run. But if we want to make this script executable, what we want to do is to basically show where our path to our Python executable is. So to do that, we are going to open it again. So I'll open the file again. And what I'll do is to add the following lines. So I'll come and right at the top of the code, I'll add the following. So I'll add shebang and then specify the path to the Python 3 command. So if you want to find out where that is, what I'm going to do is open up a new terminal. Let me maximize this so I can come and say which Python 3. And this is going to show me where the Python 3 is. So I can copy this and then go back to where I want to basically use that. So I'll come and basically paste that path right in here. Now the next thing is going to be to change the mode of this file. So right now our file is not an executable, but if we want to turn it into an executable, what we want to do is to basically change its mode. So to change its mode, you can do chmod and then +x, and then you specify the file. So in this case, it's going to be calculate.py, and this is going to make it an executable. So we can be able to run this file just like any bash script that you may create in our Linux or Mac OS system. For example, we can say bash and then calculate.py. So basically here we have unexpected token. So let's say if we say /, then we can say calculate.py. This will run our file. So let's say we wanted to actually print out the value. So I'll still open up the file. I'll open up calculate.py. And what I'll do is instead print the result. So I'll print the result of our add. So I'll just basically come and exit out of this. Then what I'll do is to go ahead and run our script. So if I say calculate.py, then that's going to return the result of our calculation. In this video, you've been able to see some of the features of the Python interpreter. Thank you for watching, guys, and if you like this video, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.